Okay, so we're going to set up our notes for today, saying what is science is our title. And by the time we're done with this PowerPoint, I want you guys to know the difference between, how do we know if something falls into the realm of science or not? And so, leave some space up at the top of your notes, okay, for what science is. And for what science is not. Okay, and then down the side of your notes, we're going to use an acronym, CONPTT, and so I want you to have the letters, but spread them out. So CON, and then PTT going down the side, okay? And I'm running out of room on my screen here, but your paper is bigger than my screen. So you're going to spell this out, but you're going to leave lots of space in between for note taking. Okay? So we're going to write down what does the C stand for and what does each letter stand for. So we just saw the video clip, and I think we can all agree that that clearly was not a scientific experiment. They did an experiment, but it didn't fall into the realm of science. But that's pretty much how they determined whether a woman was a witch or not. In real life, they would burn women at the stake, and they would say, well, if you floated, you were a witch, and if you sank, you weren't. Well, either way, you were going to die, because if you sank, you drowned, right? And if you didn't sink, well, you're a witch, so you're going to burn. So, kind of sad. Okay, so what is science? First of all, science is a process. Now, we look a lot, in your textbook, it talks about the scientific method. And that's really changing, going away from that rigid set of steps to more of a process and a way of thinking and asking questions about the world around us. But one of the key things here is that we know that the world around us can change. And sometimes those changes make us have other questions. So just the fact that we question the world around us is science. And again, this PowerPoint is going to be up on the Google Classroom. And you can access the videos that I make in class at, I think it's Zitterkoff Science is my YouTube channel. I think it is. I may change the name of it. I should change it. So Zitterkoff Science is my YouTube channel. But I should come up with something catchier than that. Like Zitterkoff Says or something like that. Zitterkoff Science? Okay. Zizas? I know. How Ziza says? Ziza says. I know. So it's Zitterkoff Science for now. All right, moving on. Or not. I hate it when it gets frozen like that. Okay, so a definition. This is what science is, or what science can do. Okay, science can study the problems in the natural world, and we learn to understand things in the natural world through doing science. But science absolutely does not have all the answers. When you use science to solve problems, that's called technology. And careers in fields of technology where you have a really good solid understanding of science and the process of science, and you use that to solve a problem. Those fields, those career choices are exploding. Because you still need the human brain. Okay? I don't want to go too fast, but I don't want to go so slowly that it's... Okay. So, things like art, philosophy, religion, these things fall into a realm of not being science. Now we also have false science and pseudoscience and emerging science. These are not sciences either. And so tonight, one of your homework assignments is to look at a couple of statements and decide if those statements fall into the realm of science. And so the next step is we have to look and see if if we can identify if a statement is science or not based upon using CONPTT. So we're going to skip our discussion question right now, and we'll come back to it. Okay, science is based on 6 things. Science must be consistent, so that's the C in CONPTT. Meaning that you can repeat it. If I do a scientific experiment, you should be able to do the experiment and get the same results. Every time you grow a green plant, it's going to grow towards the sun or its light source. That is a consistent, observable phenomenon. Whereas walking under a ladder, causing bad luck. I don't know. Science is observable. You can observe it with your senses. You can see it. You can touch it. You can taste it. You can smell it. You can hear it. And you can make observations. So it's something tangible. There's 2 statements. One of those is science, one of them is not. Of our first 2 statements, which one, green plants grow towards the sun or walking under a ladder will cause bad luck? Which one of those is observable or consistent? Green plants, right? This next one, which one is observable? Some plants eat meat, extraterrestrial beings have visited Earth. Some plants eat meat, we can see that happening. Unless a spaceship comes down and it's documented, then some people think that extraterrestrial beings have visited the Earth.
So is that how, like, the Disney movies, they, like, tribes and shit?
Okay, let's first of all clean up the language.
Sorry.
Is that how it is when we visit tribes?
Yeah, like Native Americans or like people that don't have.
Well, there aren't very many people in the world that are that secluded. There probably still are some people that live very, very undisturbed, deep in the rainforest maybe, but I'm sure it has to be a huge shock. I was just watching a documentary about a group of indigenous people, Aboriginal people in Australia, who up until the 60s, they didn't know they even existed. And it was in the 50s or the 60s. And so they were gonna do nuclear testing out in the middle of the outback in Australia. And thankfully, they went and inspected the area where they were going to explode the nuclear bombs and found out, oh my gosh, people actually are living here. It was an indigenous tribe of people, Aboriginal people. And so what they did is they rounded them all up and took them and put them in a settlement, and because they needed the land to do the nuclear testing. And so they completely altered their natural lifestyle totally, these Aboriginal peoples. So, and that happened in I want to say it was the 60s when they were doing all the nuclear testing. So it's really interesting how because their diet changed, they started getting heart disease and type 2 diabetes because they were eating sugar, and they never had any sugar in their natural diet. And so this documentary I was watching was about cooking, actually, and how food and anthropology go together. And they were interviewing people who were alive when they went from living on the land to living in camps, and how their lives had changed and how they want to go back to their natural way of life.
Why do they want to go back?
Why? Because they're dying. They're eating unhealthy. They want to live with the land. The ones who were born there and lived there. The kids that are now growing up don't know what it was like. So they're trying to keep that alive. Yeah.
Well, there's also another tribe that's called like the Sentinelese Islands, and they're still the way they were many years ago.
Mm-hmm.
It's against the law to visit the island.
Yeah. Yeah, we try to keep, I think there's nowadays more of an effort to keep those cultures undisturbed rather than, round them up and put them in a camp. So, all right, so natural. So we can explain things in science using natural phenomenon rather than something that is a supernatural phenomenon. So you wouldn't say, in science, you wouldn't say, well, the little green aliens did it. So how were the pyramids built?
Great.
Using science, where we look at how they made ramps and used sand and made a ramp up the side of the pyramid to get those big blocks up, and how they used hundreds of thousands of people to move that stuff. I really like this one. Mrs. P, grades based on your energy, color, aura. Say, oh, you're bright yellow. You are an A student for sure. Oh no, you're poop brown. That must be an F. Your aura. Do you know what your aura is supposedly? It's that glow, that energy field around your body, and it changes colors depending upon what kind of energy you're giving off. Not a realm of science. Goes right along with like crystals and things like that.
Well, we do have electrical field around us.
Yes. It's predictable. Science is predictable. So using natural laws, can predict what things are happening. So this is why we can make hypotheses about things. So number one here is a hypothesis. Without sunlight, green plants will die. And a prediction of non-science would be like a horoscope, which are so fun to read. They are. They're so much fun to read. But, it never happens just that way. Although if you read them after the day, then you can go, oh, you know, this and that happened, and you can make it kind of fit the horoscope. So then we have testable, using the process of science. And this is going to be where we bring in the scientific method. And do we remember the steps of the scientific method? You ask a question.
Create a hypothesis.
Okay, then you do some research if you need to. Then you make a hypothesis. Then
Test.
you test the hypothesis. So in other words, you do an experiment. Then,
Observe.
so you observe, you get your results. And then you make a conclusion. I'm running out of room here. Now, if your conclusion supports your hypothesis, then you test it again. But if your conclusion does not support, so if it refutes your hypothesis, then you revise your hypothesis. And then you go through and you test it all again. So you can make an observation or ask a question. You make your educated guess, your hypothesis. Now notice I don't say if it proves or disproves, because science can't prove anything. It can only support or not support. And my handwriting is really so much better than that, but it's rather difficult. So for your next quiz on Friday, your quiz on Friday is going to talk about the steps of the scientific process. So make sure you're familiar with the proper order of those and this whole idea of CONPTT. The Bermuda Triangle causes ships and planes to sink. Is that testable? Sure it is. We're going to fly into the Bermuda Triangle. Does every time a ship flies into, plane flies into the Bermuda Triangle, is it lost? No. Life comes from life and cannot come from non-life. Is that testable? Yeah. And then it's tentative, meaning we change and revise things in science. Science can be proven wrong. And as a result, so 3 theories in science that have changed. Can you think of any? Okay, the Earth is flat. The Earth, that looks like a horrible F. There, we'll try that again. The Earth is flat. That's definitely. They literally got in ships and they were looking for the edge. And they found the edge of another continent, but they didn't fall off. Okay. What about, have you ever heard of spontaneous generation? That life can come from non-life. Frogs come from mud. Flies come from rotting meat.
We have bees.
Bees come from beer. Bulls, yeah. That's in your book. Bees come from bulls, right? I remember. Gosh, another one. Yeah. It's lots of them, right? Do you think of it? Can you think of another theory?
We're the center of the universe.
Ah, the Earth is the center of the universe. Good. You guys came up with good ones. So these are all things that were believed, but then they were not scientifically supported. So, when we make observations, we're going to use our 5 senses. Things like this: the plant is green, the metal is orange, it's raining outside. Okay? We can have 2 types of observations, and you probably want to jot this part down. Okay? Qualitative and quantitative. And they have these backwards on this, I just noticed. This is absolutely wrong. I grabbed this off the internet. And so we're going to fix it. Okay? If things are measurable, you can have a quantity. How much? That's quantitative. I just thought this was a pretty slide. I liked it. But if we can't measure it and we're using our senses, then that's qualitative. So think of the word quantity. How much is something? So quantitative things are measurable. Qualitative, we use our senses. And when we start our activity called the Great Fossil Find, we're going to learn how to make observations and then use observations to make inferences. And then an inference is like a little conclusion that you come up with based upon. Okay? About done? So an inference now is when we're going to make a conclusion. It's an explanation, it's not a fact. You're using all of the observations and then some good old reasoning, connecting what you're seeing, taking your observations, and by reasoning you connect your observations to your conclusion. All of your observations help you to make a conclusion. So in the video clip that we watched when they were trying to decide if she was a witch or not, they made observations, and they definitely reached the conclusion that she was a witch. But was it based upon good reasoning? No. It was based upon faulty reasoning. So in order to make an inference, you're going to interpret your facts. And you have to make sense out of what you're seeing based upon the evidence that you're presented with. And science does a lot of making inferences. And we keep our inferences until we infer something else based upon new data or new evidence. Okay, you don't have to write these down, so just look at this. The table looks like it's made of wood, kind of like the witch, right? That's an inference. Could it really not be wood? Just really looks like wood, but it's not wood. Okay? The piece of metal is red, so it must be hot. The plant is green, so it must be healthy. I have a dead green plant at home. It's not healthy. The room is dark, so the light bulb must not be on. Well, what if the light bulb's burned out? Right, Kyle? So, I want you guys to look at this. And you're going to separate this into 3 grids. 1, 2, and 3. And I would like you, on your notes, to write down some observations that you can make about grid 1, about grid 2, and about grid 3. And then after you make your observations, make an inference. Do that on your notes right now.